Chapter 50. Rat. Rat made her way inside the mansion. It was easy, as usual. No one took any notice of her, despite the fact that she kept a running monologue going at all times. Oh, that's some fine work on the renovations. Precision craftsmanship. So elegant. And if Miss Ballard is right, it was all done so quickly too. Smiling, she paused to address a tray-holding servant who couldn't see or hear her. Look at that molding! No one appreciates good molding anymore. I wonder how much of it was original to the mansion, you know? But Rat quickly lost her smile. Truthfully, she felt awful for the Mistress Vess's collared servants. It's just flat out not right. I don't even like it when I see the Orzhov treating thralls this way. And these are humans, no different from me or Teo. I swear, if someone tried to put a collar on Teo, or, Mistress Kaya, I'd get gruel-level ornery on their asses, you know? I'd be like, Mother, can I borrow your axe? This last bit was spoken to a girl about her own age, replacing and lighting a candle in a sconce. Rat got up close to the girl. Oh, you look so frightened. I can feel the fear coming off you in waves. I mean, you're just lighting a candle and your hands are shaking so hard you can barely bring the match to a wick. What would she do to you if you messed up this one little candle? Listen, I know you can't hear me, but maybe sorta in your brain I can reassure you a little. You see, we're here, and we may not know exactly what's going on yet, but I promise you that Mistress Kaya, Teo, and me, we're not gonna let this stand. We'll find some way to fix this. Can't promise your life will be perfect afterward, right? We all got our troubles. Whatever what's we have to deal with. But we won't leave you wearing a collar. I promise. I promise. I promise. She thought this as hard as she could at the girl. But there was too much fear for Rat's minor psychic thing to cut its way through. Better just get on with this then. Moved into the large, expansive dining room. More servants were here, bringing some kind of whipped confection for dessert. Still, more servants were in the corner, playing music for the guests, who seemed to take no notice whatsoever of the collared prisoners, making their lives pleasant. Like this whole place was staffed by a legion of me. One laughing guest at the far end of the feast said, Mistress Vess, you set a remarkable table. Rat scoffed loudly, except she didn't set it, did she? No one paid her any mind, so she focused on the woman accepting the compliment. You honor me, Lord Valois, said Mistress Liliana Vess, with a slight dip of her well-coiffed head. In contrast with her elegance, two large and fairly hideous zombies guarded the necromancer from behind her chair. Rat noticed that the collared servants who came anywhere near their mistress or her bodyguards seemed to be doing everything in their power to be especially efficient. Efficient and invisible, insignificant and rat-like, desperate to avoid notice. Rat scurried around to the head of the table for a closer look. This Mistress Vess had dark hair and was somewhat pretty, but otherwise looked nothing at all like the true Miss Ravenhair. Even covered with dirt from the garden, the real Miss Liliana was beautiful, in a smoky, dangerous sort of way. This woman wasn't anything like that. Nothing special at all, really, except maybe that choker she's wearing. That's kind of sparkly and keen. Still, I bet it would look even better on the actual Miss Vess. The bejeweled choker featured a large central amulet at the woman's throat, with a sizable sapphire of a rich dark blue. There was something kind of mesmerizing about it, and Rat found she had to tear her eyes away. And not just because it's sparkly. Rat was on Mistress Vess's right, staring directly at her, studying her close. Then she noticed the hostess' left hand was tapping on a bound volume. Dodging the two zombies, Rat whipped around the back of the mistress' chair to the other side and peered down at the book in the candlelight. It was a printed copy of something titled The Fall of the House of Vess. Moreover, though this fall Mistress Vess might not look much like the true Miss Ravenhair, she did look exactly like the illustration of Miss Liliana Vess on the cover of the book. She double-checked this 2, 3, 4 times, exactly like the illustration. Even the hairstyle and the dress were the same. The only difference was the choker with its blue gem. And speaking of gems, beside the book was another even more interesting item partially covered by a cloth napkin. Rat was quite sure it was the egg-shaped gem that had belonged to the elder dragon Bolas, the one he had used to absorb the sparks of so many planeswalkers. Rat distinctly remembered that when the dragon disintegrated, his gem had fallen atop the pyramid, and she remembered that Miss Liliana, the real Miss Liliana, had picked it up just before planeswalking away. Now here it sat, beside Mistress' book cover, the candlelight sparkling on its almost liquid surface. Rat's pockets were currently stuffed with diamonds, but she found she'd be willing to trade them all for the prize. Just then, Mistress' book cover tapped her crystal goblet with her spoon to get everyone's attention. The murmur of pleasantries and the consumption of dessert quickly settled into near silence, and all eyes looked her way, Rat's included. She stood and spoke. "Gentlemen and ladies, I'm honored that you have joined me here at my home. I know for some of you this reunion of the Cabal is not a happy occasion." She let the sentence and the sentiment hang, and on cue, a round of protests circled the table to the obviously pre-assumed gratification of the hostess. She went on, "Until very recently, all of you held sway over vast territories when the Cabal was at its peak under Belzennock, and most of you believe the Cabal's time has passed now that the demon is gone. But as I hope you've seen here tonight, there's another option. For let's be honest, my new friends, you did all the work. You kept the people in check. You kept the coffers flowing. The demon didn't do that. You did. You are the true heroes of the Cabal." This also met with general approval. Rat had no idea what this Cabal was, but she had a pretty good idea it must be fairly horrible. I mean, Cabal is not a word that inspires happy feelings, right? So what's missing? What did Belzenlock actually provide? Asked Mistress Bookcover. He wasn't just a figurehead, of course. It's not enough to simply inspire fear. You need a leader who can back that fear up with actual power. Enough power to keep the peasants in line. Enough power to protect the Cabal from the Benalish and the Serens, and anyone else who might seek to once again bring down our great work. And yes, I did say our, because before I made my presence known in the Caligo, I infiltrated the Cabal to see if I found it worthy. And I did. The only problems, as I saw it, were the whims of Belzenlock, which actually served to hold us all back, and those problems no longer exist. Now only one difficulty remains. Who shall take the demon's place? She paused again. The room was silent. Lord Valois swallowed hard, cleared his throat, and proposed, "The curse of the House of Vess." He gave another small bow of her head as she took up her cause. "It makes sense, my friends. It has a name, a story, that is the stuff of every child's nightmare. Do you know of a single household in all the land that doesn't have a copy of that book? And yes, I know you all think of it as a children's tale, but every adult was a child once, and the best fears hew back to those early days. If we were all being honest, everyone at this table fears the necromancer Liliana Vess. Fear her they should." Rat thought that this impromptu speech of the Lord's sounded very well rehearsed. It isn't just the name. Liliana Vess has the power to back it up. You see what she's done here? He stood unexpectedly and grabbed a tight hold of a collared servant, an old man with an elegantly trimmed white beard, palming the back of his head. These people cower before her. They've rebuilt this home, her home, in a matter of weeks. They serve her night and day. They know they can do nothing to defy her. Should they even speak a single word of treason, they will burn. A tear began to roll down the old man's cheek. Rat was half inclined to leap up onto the table, run down its length, and stab Lord Valois in the throat. The Lord released the old servant and pushed him away before taking his and resuming. That's 2 criteria down. What remains? Trust. Yes, trust. We want a leader whom we can trust to put the Cabal above his or her own petty grudges. Belzenlock invited his fall by playing cat and mouse with some ancient sorceress from his past. A sorceress who gathered allies to help her. If I might ask, Mistress Vess, do you have old enemies that should be of some concern to us? I do not. And why is that, if I'm not too bold? Not too bold, Lord. It is a reasonable question. Perfectly reasonable. I have no old enemies because every enemy I've ever had is dead. And the only way they could come back to interfere with the Cabal is if I myself raise them. And frankly, I'm simply not enough of a fool to ever make that mistake. When I raise the dead, I control them completely and absolutely. As if to prove the point, Mistress Vess waved her hand at the 2 zombies that stood behind her chair. It was only then that Rat made another, perhaps obvious discovery. Close as she was to the 2 undead guards, it suddenly occurred to her that neither had any scent. She'd seen plenty of zombies among the Golgari and Rakdos, and she'd never known one not to completely and absolutely stink of rotting flesh. Something smells very wrong here. It's not these zombies, Lord Valois was saying. So you see, my friends, my old comrades, the Cabal can rise again. Mistress Bookcover corrected him. The Cabal will rise again. Then, led by Lord Valois, the rest of the guests took up the chant. The Cabal will rise again. The Cabal will rise again. The Cabal will rise again. Meanwhile, on a hunch, Rat reached out to touch the zombie closest to her, and as she suspected, her hand passed right through the creature. It's an illusion. Unfortunately, Rat's attempt caused the sapphire at Mistress Bookcover's throat to glow. Blue smoke poured forth from the amulet into both the zombies, rendering them solid enough to smash their fists against the wall, leaving dents that the poor servants would later have to repair. Simultaneously, Mistress Bookcover shot to her feet and looked around. Rat stepped back, momentarily fearful, but the mistress's eyes passed right over her as the hostess addressed her guests. We have an intruder, a trespasser. Some sorcery hides this spy from our vision, but the spy exists and must be caught now. Around the table, many of the guests rose to their feet. They began casting counter magic of all sorts, but this hardly terrified Rat. For years, when she was younger, her parents had sought to find a spell to cure her condition. None of that stuff ever worked. Still, she figured she had better get going. But not before I scoop up that shiny on the table. Rat grabbed Bolus's gem, but as soon as she touched it, multiple shouts rang out. There! And I see her! and it's just a girl, and a thief, and worst of all, get her! Mistress Bookcover waved her zombies forward and said with a voice like ice, "Take her now." A panicked rat dropped the gem and ran. More voices echoed across the room as rats scurried out of it. "Where'd she go?" And "I've lost her again," and "Which spell revealed her?" and "Secure the perimeter." Mistress Bookcover screamed in fury. Rat fled, but wasn't afraid. Quite the reverse. She knew down to her soul that none of the Cabal's spells had revealed her to the room. "It was the gem of Nicobolus. Holding it made me significant. Holding that gem? That's the cure to my curse." Chapter 51. Liliana Vess. Liliana emerged from her fog, only vaguely aware that the boy crouching beside her now had hurt her. Her neck burned, her hands were raw and bleeding. She reached over and grabbed him by the collar and growled, "What in Urza's name do you think you're doing?" He fumfered out something about "your collar," and she instantly released him to grasp at her throat. She was wearing the metallic collar of the prisoners of this place, and he had put it on her. She squeezed both her hands into fists and summoned a spell to reave his soul. Spectral clouds of purple-tinged black mana gathered as he scrambled backward. He aimed and unleashed the magic, which rushed toward the boy, only to be blocked by Gideon's white aura. Gideon? No, not Gideon. The boy had raised a diamond-shaped shield of white light. Perhaps there was a certain coincidental resemblance to Gideon's aura of invulnerability, or perhaps Gideon was just on her mind. But she now remembered where she had seen this boy before, on Ravnica. She had seen him fighting her Eternals. Not my Eternals, Bolus's Eternals. And not just him. His female companion too, the one with her daggers out, ready to kill. From behind his shield, the boy said, "I was just trying to remove your collar." "Really?" Liliana said darkly. "So the two of you didn't come from Ravnica to kill me?" Their quick exchange of a stunned glance told the story. Her memories were still hazy from whatever spell they had already attempted to place on her, or maybe from the collar. But she wasn't going to die at the hands of these incompetents. The boy was fairly well protected, but clearly inexperienced. So Liliana would take down the woman first by summoning up more of the purple-black coalescing mist between her bleeding fists. The death magic burned where her raw skin had been cut, but she could fix that later when her enemies lay dead. She sent the dark rippling energies forward. The woman dodged, but this was not a bolt of fire or lightning soaring on past ad infinitum. The mist swirled back around to strike the woman from behind, only to be blocked once again by another of the boy's shields. "Sphere," the woman said. "Over her." "But do it, Teo! Now!" The boy nodded and dropped both his shields. Liliana saw her moment. Once more she gathered the dark power, and just as she unleashed it, she found herself completely surrounded by a dome of bright white light. Her magic crashed against the wall of the boy's construct and nearly doubled back on her. She was barely able to block her own power to save her life, and in any case, it knocked her back on her ass. Shaking off the impact and with her palms resting flat on the earth, reached down, through the dirt and soil, past roots and earthworms and other detritus, until she found what she was looking for. She issued her summons, then struggled to find her feet, pushing herself to stand. The purple-black mist was just clearing, and through the white glow of the hemisphere she saw the woman approaching with her long knives out. They glowed violet with their own spectral energy. Liliana smiled grimly. They were coming, working their way up, just a few more seconds. "When I say now, drop the sphere," the woman commanded, "and I'll do the job I was sent to do." "I'd rather not," the boy said. "Heyo! I think it might be best if I keep you both separated, at least until everyone calms down. Liliana's mind was still foggy, but it almost seemed as if the kid was trying to protect her. That makes no sense. No one who'd survived the fighting on Ravnica would protect Liliana Vess, right? The question instantly became moot as three undead corpses tore their way up through the ground and attacked Liliana's two assailants. The boy looked scared out of his wits, though he managed to retain enough of them about him to keep extant the hemisphere of light surrounding Liliana. He backed away as a rotting woman with considerable meat left on her bones shambled toward him, her jaw distended and hanging loose, her skeletal hands looking more like claws ready to rend him to pieces. The woman, meanwhile, stabbed her blades deep into the chest of the large decomposing man that had rushed her. Straight away, Liliana felt her connection to and control of the zombies severed. Fell face first like the corpse it was. But Liliana pressed her final thrall forward, and this one presented the zombie killer with more difficulty. It had clearly been feeding the worms for quite some time, and was little more than a skeleton. The woman stabbed at it, but the blade swept through an empty ribcage. It reached for her, and she suddenly turned violet and ghostly, hands passing right through her with no more effect than her knives had had on it. The boy continued to back away while raising a diamond-shaped shield to block the female zombie, but this time he had been maneuvered into position. A skeletal hand burst forth from the dirt of the vegetable patch and grabbed his ankle tightly. He let out a little scream and tried to shake the hand off, but Liliana reinforced its power and strength, essentially staking the man-child in place, and the man's grip tightened. The shield holding back the undead female began to shimmer and waver. In front of Liliana, the woman with the knives solidified and kicked out, snapping the shin of her attacker, who dropped to one knee but kept advancing, dragging the broken leg behind it. But the woman simply circled wide around the creature, racing back toward the hemisphere and Liliana. "Teo, get ready!" Liliana knew she'd have to time this perfectly. If she brought up her magic too soon, the besieged boy wouldn't drop his. She'd have to prepare for the Dome of Light to fall, and then strike quickly before the woman could strike first. The woman said, "Now!" Liliana rapidly brought up another dark cloud, but the boy hadn't dropped the shield. It had been a feint, a trick to lure her out, although if it had, it seemed to have fooled the woman as well. For even as Liliana's dark mist again crashed uselessly against the inner wall of the hemisphere, the woman was already turning to the boy, saying, "Teo, I said now!" The female zombie broke through the boy's failing diamond-shaped shield. It was all but upon him, and yet he still managed the hemisphere around Liliana. Only when the mist dispersed, when neither Liliana nor the woman was quite at the ready, did the boy Teo drop his shield. Caught off guard, both women belatedly tried to renew their attacks, but before her opponent could bring her spectral knives to bear, and before Liliana could bring up more spectral energy of her own, something struck Liliana from behind, sending her into darkness.